Hey, I'm Courtney Waterman, your tutor. Lover of anime, manga, and math. And you just tuned into another session of Tutor Me Sempai. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're jumping into a 4th grade topic, reading large numbers. Now, if you're new to my channel, I'll be putting timecodes in for this video in the description box below. So use that to skip ahead to whatever part of the video you think is most interesting. As always, if you have any questions about what you see today, or even on homework, you can always visit me on my Facebook page at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. Today's video will have 4 parts, so leave a like, smash the subscribe, and let's get started. At this point in time, you may be really good at reading numbers this big. And if you aren't, no worries. It just takes a little bit more practice. And as you practice, you'll be better and better and better at it. However, let's say you are really good at reading numbers this big. What if I told you it's just as easy to read a number this big? Now you may be wondering, how do we do that? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be covering in today's video. But before we get into that, let's break down all the parts of this number. Now, when you look at a number this big, what's the first thing you see? Well, the first thing I see is that there are a ton of numbers here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 numbers. That's a lot of numbers. However, what's the next thing you may see? Well, to me, the next thing I see is these things here that are not numbers. If we have 9 numbers, we have these things here that are not numbers. These are called commas. So this is a comma, and this is a comma. And when your number gets really, really big, we start entering commas to help us identify just how big it is. And each comma has a special name given to it depending on where it is in your number. Now, these names are not random names like Bob or Susan. These names are very specific to your numbers so that every time you see a comma, it's going to have that same name if it's in the same place. Well, how do we go about naming these commas so we know what they are? Well, the first thing you have to do is start from your right. You're going to be starting from your right. And then you're going to be going across your number like this. And every time you reach a comma, it's going to get a new name. This first comma you run into is called the thousand comma. So, thousand. And as you keep going, this next comma is going to be called the million comma. So, million. And as your number gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you're going to have more commas with different names. However, it's very, very, very important that you name them coming from the right. You don't want to name them coming from the left because depending on how big your number is, you're going to be getting something very, very far off from the correct answer. Well, here's a very easy way to remember where you need to start. Ask yourself this one question. Am I right? Let's say you're trying to start from the left. Ask yourself, are you right? And you're going to say, no, I'm left. So therefore, that's wrong. Then you start from the right and ask yourself then, are you right? And you're going to say, yes, I'm right. Therefore, you're right. So make sure you're always starting from the right. As long as you're starting from the right, it should be no problem correctly naming your commas. So now that we talked about their commas and we talked about their names, let's go back to the numbers. What's one thing you see about these numbers here? We have 9 numbers, but are the numbers just thrown in here randomly? No. Each number is broken into groups of how many numbers? 3. That's very, very, very important. Every time you're going to have a set of numbers, it's only going to be a maximum of 3. Now, you can have less than 3. You can have 1, you can have 2, or you can have 3. But notice, every time you're going to get that 4th number, you're going to be adding a comma here. So you're only going to have a maximum group of 3 numbers. And this is why I said it's going to be very easy to read a number this big, because all you have to do is break it into its groups of 3s. If you know how to read that, you can read everything else. Now, what is this number? This is 346. What is this number? 197. What is this number? 282. Now, I say 282. I say 197, but you don't have to put the and in there. Some people do put the and some people don't. You can easily read this as 346, 197, 282. You don't need to put the and. I put the and, so if that confuses you, I'm sorry. I'm so used to putting the and, I don't even think about it. But you don't need to put the and in there when you're reading a number like this. So we have our groups of threes and we have our commas. Let's put everything together. When you're reading a number like this, you're going to first name your commas, and you have to start from the right when you're naming your commas. So we said this was the 1,000 comma, right? And we said this was the million comma, right? And now you have to also identify your groups of threes, and you're gonna call them out as you see them. And every time you get to a comma, you're going to say the comma's name, and then you're going to keep going, and then you say the comma's name, and then you keep going until the very end of your number. So let's see this play out with a smaller example before we get into this bigger one here. In our first example, we have a number this big. You see there's 5 different numbers that make up this one number. So how are we going to read this? Remember, the very first thing you have to do is name your commas. And we only have one comma here. So ask yourself that question, are you right? If we start from here and we're going to name the comma, are we right? No, we're left. So let's start from over here. Are we right? Yes, we're right. So we're going to start from the right. And the very first comma we come into is the 1,000 comma, right? It's always going to be the 1,000 comma. Now you realize we have a group of 3, but we also have a group of 2. I told you you can have smaller groups, you just can't have anything bigger than 3. So to actually read this, we're going to read what's in the box, we're going to say the name of the comma, and then we're going to say what's in the oval. So try to read along with me. What's in this box? This box says 57. Great. How about this oval here? What's in this oval? This oval says 231, or if you like to say and, 231. Now we're going to put everything together with our 1,000 comma. This says 57,231, or 57,231. That's it. That's all you have to do to read this number. As long as you can break them up into their groups, you read the groups, you read the comma, and then you move on to the next group. Let's look at another example. In this example, we have a number this big. Now, once again, the very first thing you want to do is name your commas. So we're going to name our comma. Uh-oh, we don't have a comma. What do we do when we don't have a comma? Do we panic? No. Sometimes you may run into numbers that do not have their commas, but you can always put the comma there so you don't get confused. Remember, you're only going to have a maximum group of 3. So I want you to do, whenever you don't have a comma, let's break up your number into groups of 3. So we always still want to start from the right. Start from the right. Are you right? Yes. So we have this group of 3, and we have this group of 3, right? So you have 2 groups. In between these 2 groups should be a comma. So we're going to put a comma right here. That's your missing comma. And what do you call that comma? This is your 1,000 comma. That comma is named 1,000. So even though we didn't have a comma here, we can always put our comma there because we can break this into our groups of no more than 3. So if you have a large number and there are no commas in it, don't panic. Just start from the right, find your groups of 3, make a comma. Group of 3, make a comma until you have no more groups of 3 that you can make. So now we have to read this. Remember, you're going to be reading what's inside the group, then get to your comma, then read what's inside the next group. So what does this tell us? This says 917. This says 902. Or, once again, if you want to put the ands in there, 917, 902. Now let's put everything together with our comma. 917,902. So that's 917,902. So let's get back to that very first big example and see if we know how to read that one now. So now we're back with our 9-digit number, and we need to read it. How do we read this? First, let's name our commas. Uh-oh, I did it again. I forgot our commas. Can you help me put my commas in here? Sure. Let's start from the left. No, that's not right. We have to start from the right. So let's start from the right, and we're going to name our commas. Well, technically, put our commas in there so that we can name them. So we're going to group this. This is going to be one group of 3. This is going to be another group of 3. And this is going to be another group of 3. And I put them all in a different shape so we know they are different groups. So in between these two groups, we have a comma. And in between these two groups, we have another comma. So now we have our missing commas. However, we have to name them. Remember, we're naming from the right. So this first one is called the 1,000 comma. The next one is going to be called the million comma. Remembering the names of the commas are probably going to be the hardest part of reading a number this big. But once you remember that, this is going to be, once again, cakewalk. So, can you read what's in this shape? This says 282. How about this shape? 197. How about this shape? 346. Now we're going to put everything together and see if we can read our big number here. So we're going to start in this shape and say 282,197,346. Once again, 282,197,346. As long as you break them up into their groups and you name your commas properly from the right, reading this big number is as easy as reading this smaller number. So I hope you are following today's examples, and I hope you're ready to read all those really big numbers now. But if you have any questions, anything whatsoever, remember you can always visit me on my Facebook page at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. If you hadn't done so already, remember to leave that like. It really helps the channel by letting YouTube know that you found this video helpful. And if you found the video helpful, so can someone else. So leave a like, hit the notification bell, smash the subscribe button, and share this video with a friend. Well, that's all the time I have for today. I'm really hoping to help with your homework, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Courtney, and this has been another session of Tutor Me Sempai.